Hi, everyone. This is Cynthia, your friend. Welcome to the God Place. This is where we know that God is omnipresent all the time. And today I have a friend of mine, Ani Williams, and she does remarkable things with sound and her harp. And she has an extraordinary way of displaying and teaching the story of Mary Magdalene in southern France. And that's where you are right now, isn't it? You're in France?
That's right.
Well,
Yep.
so I'm just going to let you take it away, how you discovered the story, how you felt the passion to tell the story and bring people to southern France.
Great. Well, this is really my passion, and I'm currently writing a book, Cynthia, on the history of Mary Magdalene around the Pyrenees. And a lot of people don't realize that she was extremely popular in Spain at a very early time period. The very earliest Jewish immigrants came out of Jerusalem during the time that Rome was persecuting the Jews around 70 AD. And a lot of them streamed into what was known as Iberia and southern France. So they settled mostly along the coastal regions. But, growing up, I knew nothing about Mary Magdalene except the things that, most people have heard, that she was a prostitute and she was a sinner and she was always crying and penitent and weeping everywhere. You would see images of her hanging her head and weeping, and there'd be a breast showing or something. And I just thought, oh no, so I couldn't relate to this woman until I went to a one woman show in England during one of my pilgrimages. I used to take people all over. I'll probably do it again a few times after my book is written, because Spain has a lot to offer in these mysteries. So I went to this one woman show presentation on the Gospel of Mary, taken from one of the Gnostic texts discovered at Nag Hammadi, Egypt. And I was floored by not only this woman's powerful presentation, but she told the story of a woman of wisdom, a woman of great power and presence, and a mover and a shaker in the circle of disciples. And then I came upon some of the things that were coming out of the Vatican. And this is really interesting because in the old days, you probably heard about, all of the torturing and burning of heretics throughout Europe, mainly in France. It was this huge in the medieval era and before and after. So for hundreds and hundreds of years, anyone who didn't go along with the status quo Church of Rome was considered heretical. Well, then I discovered the meaning of the word heretic. It means one who is free to choose.
Oh, no kidding.
Heretic or heretikas is mainly from the Greek-rooted word meaning free to choose. Anyway, so after that experience in England with the one-woman show of the Gospel of Mary, and it is the gospel, it's the story of Mary Magdalene, and it turned out, as I would discover throughout the years, that a lot of the Gnostic texts were written about the ministry of Mary Magdalene, because what we understand of the history of Mother Mary is that she went into retreat more after the crucifixion, and many stories talk about her mainly being in Ephesus and having a beautiful home there, but periodically returning to Jerusalem when she was able to. But not coming into Spain like we have accounts of Mary Magdalene or southern France. So I don't know if you want to stop me or I just keep going because I can go forever.
Keep going, keep going.
And by the way, thank you, Cynthia, for inviting me because this is one of my favorite things to talk about. So I began to write songs for Mary Magdalene, and I began to write articles about her. And it just kept evolving. This woman, oh, I forgot. I mean, maybe it was unconscious, but I wore red, and she's often depicted wearing a red outer robe. And this lady in red, whoever she was, fascinated me because she seemed like an archetype for our time. And certainly I, among women, needed to become empowered, needed to find my authentic self. And I feel that Mary Magdalene is one of the archetypes for our time. As recent as 2017, I believe it was May, Pope Francis, bless his heart, proclaimed to the Vatican Council that because Mary Magdalene was the first witness of the risen Christ, of Jesus in the garden in his body of light, she was the apostle to the apostles. And he said that Mary Magdalene is the hope for our time, the hope and the vision for our new time. Wow. So, many articles and recordings of music for her later. I continue on this road. Which is now a focus on writing a trilogy of books. And the first two cover a lot of the history of Mary Magdalene, first in the area of the Pyrenees and into Catalonia, and
Wow.
then up to Paris and throughout France. So it's quite a journey.
Yeah, I think that her story was suppressed because she was so powerful. And it suppressed the sacred feminine. And I love when Margaret Starbird, which she's a friend of yours, I know as well, and she talks about until you can put that couple in the bedchamber, in the nuptial chamber, things are going to be off balance. And saying that the perfect woman is a virgin, it sets us, the women, up for unnatural. What I was being, our spirituality and our humanity is unnatural in that. And I remember when I first heard the story, my first reaction was, wow, what a great husband Jesus would be. Wow. That was my first reaction to that story.
That's a beautiful reaction, and it's totally natural. And I'm glad you brought up Margaret because she inspired many, many of us. And she was a pioneer in really bringing this truth out about Mary Magdalene's true position and as the bride, as the holy bride.
Yes. Yes.
Over the years, I did compose some songs about that. One was based on a Gnostic text called The Thunder Perfect Mind.
Oh.
And it is a beautiful treatise. I am the whore and the holy one. I am the bride and it goes on with this polarity of division and divisiveness. I am the one who you have scattered, and now you gather me together. And we gather her into ourselves.
Yes.
And I'll never forget that my mother, when I was growing up, I grew up with this typical attitude of the age. And my mother called the menses, the monthly period, the curse, because her mother had called it the curse.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Right?
Uh-huh.
A lot of people these days don't remember that, but it was a curse to be a woman And it was a curse to be half of a human being that really wasn't honored, was a sinner. And so part of what I'm writing about now is a certain chapel that I've discovered in the Pyrenees. It's
Oh,
a secret so far, its location,
sure.
but it displays, it's dedicated to Mary Magdalene,
Oh, no.
Santa Magdalena,
And that's in
and
Spain? Is that in Spain? The Pyrenees? Oh, okay. Okay.
well, the Pyrenees run basically east-west, kind of at a little bit of an angle, but mostly east-west, and they divide France from Spain. It's a natural border.
Okay. That's right. Okay. Thank you.
And this chapel is one of 64 chapels dedicated to Mary Magdalene in Catalonia, which is just a little section of Spain in the northeast.
No kidding.
Everybody thinks of Mary Magdalene, oh, the churches in France and here and there, and we find them here and there, but they're concentrated. So anyway, this humble little chapel that nobody's ever heard of in the mountains of the Pyrenees has a bridal chamber painted over the altar.
Oh my goodness.
And it depicts Mary Magdalene. It's one of the two images that are painted in churches that show her on her deathbed. It's a very rare depiction. And her light body is coming out of her mouth and being received by Jesus at her bed. And it's a beautiful image of this white, beautiful woman emanating out of her mouth. Well, what's really interesting is this is an ancient Egyptian tradition, and we know that Jesus spent time in Egypt.
Wow.
So there are so many so-called heretical secrets and Grail traditions embedded in the Pyrenees region that people don't often hear about, and that's why I'm writing this book.
Oh no.
So
Oh man.
there's
Well, so when do you think that will be ready? I want to read that book. I want to go to the Pyrenees. Oh my gosh. Oh,
well, it's just that it's an area that has remained sleepy and hidden and hasn't been focused on, and I'm actually glad of that because it still retains the purity and the quiet peacefulness that some of these other centers like Vézelay, France, or Saint-Maximin Saint-Baume in Provence, they have the purported relics of Mary Magdalene, and people have flooded there for centuries. And they're powerful places, but I tend to prefer going to these out-of-the-way, tiny little humble places that nobody's heard of, and the energy is still so palpable and strong. And you could argue that it's strong in any place because wherever we have a connection or an expectation, it's going to feed us somehow. And certainly every place of pilgrimage and adoration over the centuries and millennium have energy. So, it's everyone's choice.
Every beautiful place on this earth, when it's discovered, turns into a tourist attraction, and it brings that energy. And you're right. There's something about keeping something pristine, spiritually pristine and sacred that fills your soul in its presence when you go there.
And yes, absolutely. And I think these places I'm writing about will still maintain their humble stature because they're so out of the way that not very many people will take the trouble to, trek all the way into the mountains to see them.
I think it's interesting. I totally believe right now that the sacred feminine, the spirit of the sacred feminine is rising slowly, quietly, but with incredible strength and
Absolutely.
that she is our sister and our teacher, because from what I've learned, and I'm sure that this woman that you saw, she had the wisdom like Jesus had. And that's why they were so connected, and such a beautiful love story there. Her spiritual wisdom, which the feminine wisdom is different than the male wisdom. And,
Right.
and I would have loved to have seen her speak, and they all did. And I also heard, Ani, that there were like 42 apostles, and that there were 12 men, but the rest were women. And she kind of led the female side of that. And when you think about it, when we hold pilgrimages, when we hold anything that's spiritual, that women usually make up the majority of the those that attend these type of things, because, and we take it in, and we don't necessarily go out and preach it. I think it's interesting also how, and I'm sure you've run into this thousands of times. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was telling her the story of Mary Magdalene, and she said, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. And I asked her, do you ever think of why you believe what you believe? Because that happened 2,000 years ago.
That's right.
2,000 years ago. How can we say what's true or not true 2,000 years ago? What we do have the ability to do, because we have free will, is to choose what stories we like best. And I happen to like that one better.
And so you're a heretic, true to the word,
I'm
free to
true.
choose.
Sign me up.
Well, what's interesting is there's just a lack of education and maybe interest in reading some of the ancient texts, but we have enough verified documentation
Sure we do.
that indicates that there was an apostolic college led by women. Martha went to southern France, just up north of Arles, at Tarascon on the Rhone River.
Mm-hmm.
And Magdalene purportedly settled on the coast.
Mm-hmm.
And there are documentations that say, going back hundreds of years, about Mary Magdalene bringing the body of St. James, the brother,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
to Spain.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are just so many documents that are available in the universities and online now that, one can read about this. And when you mentioned the bridal chamber and you mentioned the sacred couple that Margaret Starbird so beautifully brought in her books and study, I've been studying the Zohar, which is one of the esoteric aspects. It's actually an older book than the Torah, apparently, and it came out of Israel, written in the mountains and channeled, I believe, by information given by the prophet Isaiah to a Hebrew holy man. And this information of this teaching about the bridal chamber and the sacredness of holy union, and how the man, when he comes together with the woman in the bridal chamber, he meditates on the light. This is in the ancient texts that came out of that teaching of the original Jewish belief. And
Uh-huh.
it came into Spain through teachings of Kabbalah and the old texts of the Zohar. And it speaks about the light coming in as a seed to create the new child. And the man would meditate on that principle of holy light. And it's such a pure teaching about that, just it totally changes our idea about what sexuality is.
Absolutely.
The perception of light, the seed
Absolutely.
of light, is and the holiness of the bridal chamber.
I love this because you're exactly right. We are mammals. That means we have instincts like mammals. We have the instincts like the plants and all vegetation, which is survival and procreation. And men are wired differently. And we're seeing more and more of that now. That, I mean, we've always known it, but they're wired way differently than women. Someone
Well,
like,
the male aggression that we're seeing on the planet right now is one good example.
and feeding the sex trafficking and all of these horror stories that we're hearing, right? But to think of your husband or your lover or your man as coming to you with a spiritual understanding of the union, for the male to feel that is very, 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 very powerful. And it makes sexuality beautiful, sacred, fulfilling. You feel that oneness with all the universe when you have that
Right.
oneness. And if you happen to have that excitement at the same time, and that big explosion at the same time, that really pops you out into the universe.
It's a gift of joy. And in the Zohar, it speaks about the Holy Spirit in the form of Shekinah, the female spirit of illumination and wisdom coming in between the male and the female, and them uniting in that wisdom and that holy presence. So that creates a trinity.
Oh, isn't that beautiful? But
In the
we're spiritually aware. Other mammals, unless they're around us in a domestic fashion, they're not quite as emotional. I mean, we've all seen our dogs and kitties all be emotional and play with our emotions. We've all seen that, the domesticated one, as we call them. But for the most part, we don't really see emotion, or do we? Now that I'm thinking about it, like the elephants, they come together when they all go back to where they were born. They
well,
have that memory.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
the whole herd comes together and supports that. I mean, so
right.
really,
They do have emotion, and I think
yes, they do.
we're discovering more and more. I know I have had many experiences with singing to various animals,
Oh,
and
yes.
I know this is a little off subject
No, it's
now.
right. We're right in there, because if you put Jesus and Mary Magdalene at the best understanding of a spiritual couple, and us being humans, we relate to that as
Right.
like that would be the most sacred, special understanding of love, an expression of love. But everything else comes under it,
Well, and we were talking about animals and do they have emotions? Yes, I believe they do, because they're sentient beings, and I had quite a few experiences with offering songs to animals that are ill, and in one occasion it was an elephant, and I was singing to this elephant that
Aw.
was chained to a metal bar, and it was in a fenced area, and I was right up against the fence, and that elephant got up and walked over to me and stretched its trunk
Oh,
to hug me and embrace me, to thank me for the song,
oh.
that it brought some sort of relief. So yes, I think they are sentient. But back to Mary Magdalene, she brought a tradition, I believe, and this is maybe a stretch for some of your listeners, but I believe that Jesus spent time. It's in the texts, it's in the Bible, that he did spend time in Jordan. He did spend time in his ministry across the Jordan, where there was the largest Artemis temple in all of the Middle East at the time. And he spent time in Egypt, and he was in the temples. And I believe that Mary Magdalene did too. And they were trained in some of the ancient mysteries. So that helped his healing mystery and her healing mystery and Martha's healing mystery, because these were ancient traditions in
Sure.
Egypt, in Greece, and in Samaria, how to heal with energy, how to heal with our love and our belief. So, this wasn't isolated to one little book and one little culture. This was a big teaching all over the planet. And for those who choose to explore it, it's there to discover. And I think the healing aspect is one of the most important and miraculous things about Jesus and Mary Magdalene and John and Martha's ministry, that they did it with the belief in the Holy Spirit and the love and the divine. And he was crucified just like Asclepius was crucified in a similar parallel story. Asclepius, the god of medicine from Greece, 1500 BCE or so, it's estimated. He was crucified because he raised the dead. Jesus raised Lazarus. He raised the woman Jairus's daughter from the deathbed, and other people were totally healed. And that was a huge threat, because the church was not ready for someone to be that powerful.
Powerful. And it all goes down to powerful. I saw one time a History Channel, and they were talking about the history of the Jews back in the days of Jesus. And this really sealed the deal for me. I mean, in other words, I like to bring this up when people doubt it, because when I first heard it, I accepted it as truth right away. But in speaking to other people, when you go exploring a little bit, like Margaret did, like you've done, then all these beautiful things start opening up. So what I had heard was it was Jewish law for a man. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a law. And we know what laws are. Circumcision, you know the Torah. You be presented at the temple. You know your father's trade. And you had to be married. To enter the temple, to be called rabbi, you had to be married. It was law. And all those other four show up in the New Testament, except for the fifth one. And I know that there's some speculation that maybe the wedding at Cana was the wedding of Mary Magdalene and Jesus.
Interesting that you mention that, because there are several depictions in the paintings in churches in this region. One in particular near where I'm living. It's a beautiful, large painting of the wedding at Cana, and it's obviously Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and his mother is the woman, helping to officiate.
Uh-huh. Yeah, she's the hostess. She's the one trying to make sure everybody's getting. And so we'll just say it was a friend of theirs. Okay. To keep that diversion going and keeping people off track and off balance. And it's so interesting how, if you really look inside of your heart and you really understand and you learned how to listen to the Holy Spirit, you will be able to understand the truth versus the not truth. And I remember when I heard this, I couldn't even tell you what page in Dan Brown's book, the Da Vinci Code, is page 110. I read that over and over again. I said, yes, because I was raised Catholic. And I had I never bought into, never even in my learning, I never bought into the fact that she was a prostitute for some reason. Even when I was little, I never quite bought into that. But man, when I saw that other, it just went, phew, there it is. That's what happened. Exactly. Isn't that beautiful? So, I've seen, maybe you can explain to me, Margaret did, but there's 7 stars around Mary Magdalene when you see some paintings of her. Do you know what the significance is of that, the 7?
Not exactly. And, it could signify the 7 planets. It was considered throughout at the time of Pythagoras, Plato. This is 400, 500 BC, that the 7 were the 7 planets.
And
And
the next time that we get together, I want you to talk all about Pythagoras in your music and all of that you do
yeah,
for people.
I
Okay?
to. I just want to finish with the stars, because sometimes she's displayed with 12, and that would of course be the constellations in the heavens, which again brings the ancient knowledge, the ancient traditions from Egypt, Sumeria, and Greece. So
and because you and I are both musicians, we know 7 is the scale and 12 is the chromatic scale. So there it is.
exactly.
There it is,
Exactly.
folks. So in closing, what would you like to leave our listeners with? Please mention the name of your book again, so we can all be looking for that. And
Yeah, the book actually won't be out for quite some time, but I would say sometime late this year, perhaps.
okay,
It's
good.
called A Dragon Path, Feminine Temples Across the Pyrenees.
Isn't that
And there's the website that people could go to. That's probably the best place, because that's where I'll announce new things that come out.
and that's AniWilliams.com.
Yeah, ANI, not Annie, but Ani, ANIWilliams.com. And there are zillions of articles
Oh, great.
on Mary Magdalene, on many things, and music they can listen to.
Thank you.
Video.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all you do in bringing attention to this beautiful story with your music and your heart and your spirit. Thank you for everything you do, Ani.
Yeah.
So it was beautiful. Namaste.
Thank you.
All right. Love you.